Senator John Barrasso argues that it will overheat the economy and fuel inflation. What's your response?
I totally disagree.
Here's the deal with inflation is that if we do not get the root cause of these price increases right, then policy decisions could be made that could really negatively impact your life.
We're not even remotely close to a point to say that we're at rising inflation.
The fears of inflation are being overblown.
The consensus seems to be that we're okay.
What we're dealing with now, I guess, arguably is a sort of transitory situation.
The inflation we're seeing in the economy right now is passing transitory and manageable.
If you're working, the impact of inflation is actually quite small.
The economists at this point anticipate that this will be temporary.
When you look at what actual prices are going up, it's in very specific sectors. If this was an overall inflationary issue, we would see prices going up in relatively equal amounts across the board, no matter what the good is.
I think things are going to level out.
It seems to be ticking up a little bit, and part of that is actually not a bad thing.
There's a general consensus among economists that a little bit of inflation would actually be a good thing.
Actually, prior to COVID-19, we were under our inflation targets. The Fed sets an inflation target of 2 to 3%. We were not reaching that for many, many years. And so this also could be a natural rebalancing of our economy.
I think that our focus on inflation in the midst of this crisis is inappropriate.
Do you not think Democrats are to blame or Democrat policies?
For rising inflation?
Yes.
No.
One debt to society later.
And, of course, this inflation news is going to be tough for the administration. Nothing, Joe, nothing has been more politicized than inflation. Just let's hearken back to all the things we've been through. First, it was transitory. Then, inflation is good. Then we went to corporate greed. Now we're at Putin.
Well, there are a number of steps we've taken. If you compare month to month, we've seen inflationary pressure or inflationary numbers go down month to month.
Month over month, up 0.8%. That shows it even month to month. Inflation is accelerating.
All right, guys, so it ain't looking too well for the Democrats that were downplaying inflation all last year. At first, they said that it's transitory, right? That's what Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell said. Okay, that's what they told. They said, hey, man, it's only going to be 2 or 3 or 4 months. It's transitory. It'll peak, and then it'll fall. Okay, and I was saying at the time, I was like, I don't know about that, bro. If this thing goes into November, December, particularly late fall of 2021, I don't think it's necessarily transitory. Okay, I think that this is going to be long term. Okay, and lo and behold, we are 3 months into 2022, and we have the highest inflation rate that we've seen in 40 years. Okay, 40 years. Yeah, so how are those mean tweets working out, right? How are those mean tweets working out for the American consumer? As this is actually predicted to get worse due to what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. This is the tip of the iceberg in terms of how much worse this can get. I'm just keeping it a whole buck with you guys, right? So with that being said, let's actually listen to CNN's coverage of what's going on with these inflation numbers so that you guys get a better understanding of what's happening here. Take a look.
Breaking here just moments ago, brand new numbers on inflation. So let's get straight to CNN chief business correspondent Christine Romans. All right, what do they say, Christine?
They say that inflation is accelerating. These are pre-war numbers as well. So many people had thought we'd see a peak in inflation in March, maybe. Well, now we have a war in Russia not captured, or war in Ukraine not captured here. Year over year, 7.9% is the inflation number. That is a 40-year high. Month over month, up 0.8%. That shows it even month to month. Inflation is accelerating. It is gas, it is shelter, it is food, groceries. All these things you basically can't live without are rising here. So when you dig into these numbers, you can see just why so many Americans are so sour on the economy on those opinion polls. It's because they're paying more for just about everything. Used cars, look at that, Brianna, up 41% from last year. Gasoline up 38%. And again, these numbers don't capture the big disruption in the economy from Putin's war in Ukraine. We'll continue to watch these numbers.
Yeah, so can anybody explain to me what is going right for the Biden administration? I mean, I'm so serious. What is actually going right for the Biden administration? I can't think of anything. Okay, we have a border crisis. We got crime surging across this country. We have inflation, we have supply chain. So from a domestic perspective, it's a disaster. From a foreign policy perspective, it's a disaster. I mean, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Russia, potentially China and Taiwan, we're not respected anymore. I mean, what is going right? Okay, even the pandemic. Okay, the one thing that Biden was sure, he was sure that anybody in office can do better than Trump. Anybody in office can do better than Trump. That's what they said, right? Biden, in his first year in office, had more deaths from COVID than under Trump. And, normally, I would give Biden the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, you know what, that's not his fault. However, I can't do that because the mainstream liberal media told us while Trump was in office that every single COVID death came from him, right? He was responsible for that. Okay, blood is on his hands. Okay, so hey, with that being said, applying the same standard they applied to Trump, I gotta say, Biden objectively has done worse than Trump when it comes to this pandemic, right? So with that being said, again, I would ask the strongest Biden supporter. I would really, really want to know. I'm curious. What has Biden done that you would define as successful? Okay, what has been successful about this guy's presidency thus far? Because I will be hard-pressed to say that anything has been successful so far. Okay, so with that being said, let's read about what's going on with inflation here. So again, we get a better understanding of, what's happening and what might happen in the future. And then we're going to have like an overall takeaway here in regards to what I think the lesson should be from all this, because I think it's very, very, very obvious what has led us to this situation for the most part. Okay, so let's read here. U.S. inflation climbed to a 7.9% annual rate in February, another 4-decade high, as skyrocketing energy and commodity prices related to the Russian invasion of Ukraine pushed already elevated costs higher. Okay, so the Biden administration has come out and they're playing this game where they're trying to now pass the blame to, well, all of this stuff is happening because of Russia and Ukraine, while ignoring the fact that all this stuff was happening before that. Now, is Russia and Ukraine going to elevate it and make it worse? Absolutely. And anybody telling you any different than that, they're lying to you. Okay? It's possible to say two things at one time, right? It is possible to say this stuff was happening before Russia and Ukraine. It's also possible to say that because of Russia and Ukraine, it's going to get worse. Okay? Sometimes people miss the nuance in this stuff because of politics. They want to play left and right when both things can be true at the same time. In fact, both things are true at the same time. Okay? The Labor Department's Consumer Price Index, which measures the cost of goods and services across the economy, was at its highest rate since January 1982, when annual inflation was 8.4%. Now, I believe that Reagan was in office during that time. However, that was coming off of Jimmy Carter's inflationary period, right? The president that Joe Biden is being compared to, which I think is unfair to Jimmy Carter. Because I think that Biden objectively is worse than Jimmy Carter. In fact, if it keeps going at this rate, Biden might be the worst president ever, right? He literally might go down as the worst president in the history of the United States. Okay? I'm so serious. That's how bad this is at this point. Okay? I'd be hard pressed to find anything that you could define as successful from the Biden administration right now. Okay? Rising energy prices, including higher gasoline prices, help push up the inflation reading, along with increases for grocery, restaurant food, transportation services, and apparel. Again, gasoline prices are going to go even higher, okay, because of our sanctions on Russia and what's going on over there, which means all that other stuff, groceries, food, transportation services, all that stuff is going to go up as well too, okay, because oil and gas is a key component of transporting those things and producing those things. So, yeah, this is about to get crazy, right? It's going to get absolutely insane. Economists expect additional price increases related to the Ukraine crisis after crude oil prices in March hit their highest levels since 2008 and U.S. gasoline prices reached record highs. Excluding volatile energy and food prices, the Labor Department reported Thursday that consumer inflation rose at 6.4% annual rate in February, up from 6% the prior month. The 12-month rates aren't adjusted for seasonality. The CPI measures what consumers pay for goods and services, including groceries, clothes, restaurant meals, recreation, and vehicles. Month to month, CPI rose a seasonally adjusted 0.8% in February. So it's not just a 12-month increase, right, from last February to this February. Is also a from January 2022 to February 2022 increase as well too. Okay, so Jen Psaki lied and was like, "Oh, month to month we're seeing it go down," when literally the exact opposite is happening. Okay, Jen Psaki lies so much, right? She lies so much, and the mainstream media tries to make her out to be so great at her job. I'm like, no, she just lies all day long. Gasoline prices were up a seasonally adjusted 6.6% from the prior month for an unadjusted annual increase of 38%. Groceries were up 1.4% over the prior month for an annual rate of 8.6%. Housing rental costs rose at a slower rate, up 4.7% over the year. Used car prices declined slightly last month, pausing double-digit price increases over the past year. High demand for goods from consumers and supply chain constraints have elevated inflation over the past year, with persistent shipping bottlenecks and shortages of supplies like semiconductors rippling across the economy. A historically tight labor market has pushed wages higher and led to more job openings than there are workers looking for work, leading businesses to struggle to keep up with demand. Before the Ukraine crisis, economists and policymakers had been hoping for a peak in year-over-year inflation this spring as supply chains heal from pandemic-related disruptions and the Federal Reserve begins an unexpected series of interest rate increases next week. But the outbreak of war has supercharged prices for oil, wheat, and precious metals, threatening higher inflation for longer. Yeah, so I've been predicting literally for a year that the feds were lying when it was like, oh no, we're going to wait until 2023 to increase rates. And I'm like, no. I think this is coming in spring of 2022, right? This inflation thing was obviously out of control once it hit about August, right? Once it hit about August, it was like, all right, this is a transitory thing. It don't even sound right. Quote, we thought that inflation would come down, especially due to the untangling of the global supply chain, but we don't know how what's happening in Ukraine will retangle that, said Joel Naroff, chief economist at Naroff Economics LLC. All right, so here's the thing. I think this is the takeaway. At this point, everybody should agree that next time we have a pandemic, okay, or some mysterious virus pops up, we should wait a lot longer before we decide to shut down the world, okay? Because shutting down the world is kind of what led to this, okay? Let's be real. Definitely the Biden administration and the Democrats screwed up when it came to pumping more money into an economy and not incentivizing people to go back to work, okay? Which has accelerated inflation. But the initial shutdown, right, that was done across the whole world, okay, I think is what really prompted this. And again, we've seen that with the global supply chain thing. Okay, it's not just an American supply chain crisis, it's global. Oil is a global market. We're seeing right now the ramifications of the shutdown when it comes to oil prices, right? And you can go watch my prior videos on this stuff recently for my explanation on how the pandemic shutdown led to oil prices being elevated, okay? So the thing is that in the future, I think, again, the lesson here is that we should never, ever, ever shut down the world, okay? We should never do that unless we actually have a virus that is like killing people at like, you know, at least, 10%, 20% fatality, okay? Then, yeah, we should probably consider doing it. But that ain't what happened with this virus, okay? And I think if we had to go back and do it again, most people would agree that a shutdown is the wrong move, okay? And on top of a shutdown, deciding to spend trillions and trillions of dollars, put money into an economy that simply can't produce enough to match demand, yeah, that wasn't a good idea either. Okay, paying people not to work was not a good idea, and that also contributed to it, which is solely the responsibility of the Democrats, okay? Because it became clear in 2021, early 2021, that, hey, you know, the economy had been stimulated enough. We were going to see record growth rates. there was no need to stimulate the economy even more, and the Biden administration decided, no, we're going to do it anyways, right? We're going to spend 1.9 trillion more dollars anyways, okay? Which I think really kind of took us over the edge when it comes to this inflation thing. So, like I said, man, what is going right for the Biden administration? I don't know. It seems like there's worse news that comes out every single day. But hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.